Guess what the #1 request about serves is? More power. Everybody wants to have more power on the serve. I want to serve harder. I want to get more miles per hour on the serve. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that and the drills with which you can work on the #1 indicator whether you are actually going to get more power on your serve or not. My name is Meike Babel. I'm a former top 30 WTA pro, and if you like my videos, go ahead and subscribe. Click that little bell that lets you know when I'm putting out new content. And now let's get going. Let's get some more pop on the serve. A lot of players, when they're trying to hit a harder serve, are using their shoulders and their arm. They're trying to accelerate with all their might. And yes, you get a couple more miles on the serve that way. But you're also really getting into injury territory if that's all you're doing. The #1 source of power for a good serve is your back hip. How effectively you can load it and how quickly, fast and explosive you can drive your right hip, if you're right-hand or left hip, of course if you're a lefty, up and out into the serve. And that's why you're seeing pro players not doing massive arm exercises, but you see a ton of things that they do to activate their back hip properly and then also to accelerate up and forward into their serve. So that is exactly what I'm going to show you today, and how to get into the proper trophy position, loading position, power position, whatever you want to call it, the most important stage of the serve. So what is the loading position? And I'm using Dr. Mark Kovac's 8-stage model to explain the serve. And the reason why I love that model so much is because it clearly shows you stage after stage after stage. And the most important part is, if you're not doing the right things in the first 3 stages, 4 stages, there's precious little you can do later on in the motion to correct it. And the arm motion, how fast you can release your arm, is based on how you use your lower body. So ideally, in the trophy position, loading position, power position, what you want to achieve are a couple of things. #1, shoulder over shoulder. My toss arm shoulder wants to be over my hitting shoulder. So I have this tilt here. And the same tilt should be present in your hips. So my left hip is over my right. And as a right-hander, I want to load down and back into my right hip. Just the reverse for a lefty. 2 other things, and we're also going to talk about those, is the lowest drop of my elbow should coincide with my lowest drop here in my knee bend. Ideally, I want to have about a 45-degree angle here. The arch type of a great serve has the 45 degrees here. You have your hip over hip and shoulder over shoulder. And all the marks that I showed you with a platform position here, meaning I have my feet apart, are also true for a pinpoint loading position. So when I'm pulling my foot up, I still want to load down and back. I want to have the lowest part of my elbow coinciding with the lowest drop of my legs, and I have shoulder over shoulder. If you do not get into this position, it will be difficult to get whatever the most effective is for you. And it really depends on how strong you are, on how flexible you are, how much mobility you have. There are a lot of factors, but always think about it that way. Even if you're not as strong, if you are using the biggest muscles of your body properly and in the right sequence to load from the ground up, use the ground as the source of power here. If you can get into this position and then you accelerate up and forward, you are going to hit a good serve. But whatever you do from here on out, accelerating up to the ball, making contact, and then the follow through and the finish, all of that is a function of what you put into stage 1, 2, and 3. So the loading of the hip is the most important indicator of whether you are going to hit a faster serve or not. So how do I load the hip properly? Okay, so to show what I mean by loading into the hip, down and back, into the heel of my back foot, I'm actually going to put a sticky here on my hip. So if I were to just drop down better than nothing. But what I want is that the sticky drops down and back, so that when I'm doing this, you do see that it's pointing more towards the right back for me as a right-hander, as opposed to just here. And now we get into the question of how deep should I drop into my load. That is determined by how strong your legs are and how fast you can get out of that load. So think about Boris Becker. He's the player that I can think had the deepest knee bend. I don't think any of the top pros right now are having as deep of a bend. But if I bend down as low as he did, I would not come out of that load. It would cost me too much strength to stabilize that and then accelerate up. So I have to figure out how deep I can dip down. And the first way that you do that is a single leg dip. So what you're gonna do is, if you're right-hander, you wanna do that on your right leg. If you're left-hander, you wanna do that on your left. So very simple exercises. Cross your arm here and see how low you can dip without losing control. And losing control in this instance would mean that your kneecap is wobbling, it's buckling, or you're wobbling here. And I feel that when I'm dipping down lower than this, I feel my right hip pushing out. And that's not what you want. You want to stay very straight here. So this is how low it gets these days for me. So anything further than that, even if I do it on 2, it's probably going to cost me too much energy, and or I cannot do it over a long period of time. So always think about, you want to be able to do this over 3 sets. The second step in the progression is that you're actually doing single leg jumps. And you want to make sure that doing them also in a very controlled way, meaning you're not going to jump all over the place. What you're going to do is go and find a marker somewhere, or just use that little crosshair of the lines. Again, I'm using my back leg, which for me, a right-hander is my right. And you see 3, 4, 5, that it is definitely not as good as it used to be. And you see that I actually have to spend some time down here to balance, to not topple over. So really good servers, they can do this 10 times, super quick, super stable, and with a lot of control. So this is one way to build up that strength a little bit, and to also feel how to engage your back leg. How do you translate that into serving now? The loading down and back, again, is the action for the reaction of going up and out. And by up and out, I mean not just up, nor do I mean forward. And the loading down and back is completely counter to one of the worst coaching cues that is still around. The left hip for a right-hander needs to be over the line, because that is doing the exact opposite of what I want. I want to, again, load down and back into my back heel, because I want to drive up and out. If I'm doing this, I'm going to fall forward. I'm going to put so much stress on my hip here, and I'm still not getting into the up motion a whole lot. Yes, I'm accelerating up some, but not in the most effective way possible. Down and back to go up and out. In order to get the feel for that, we're going to do a little bit of a weird exercise, and it's going to be serving from your back leg. So we've done our single leg dips, squats, we've done our single leg jumps. Now I'm trying to combine this together in loading down and back and then hitting. And the first step can be that you're loading and you're stepping onto your front foot and then hit. So here, I'm loading into my back leg. Loading, I can step and hit. Obviously that's not there to mimic the serve, but it is for you to feel the back leg getting more engaged. Another great drill to feel the load down and back is the pick up and throw drill. Now, if you see this for world-class players or high-level juniors, that ball is all the way down here. But I don't have the mobility or the strength anymore, so I have to work with what I got. So you can use a cone and place the ball a little lower. This is what I got today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load down and back. And yeah, if I'm just picking up the ball here, I still feel my weight shift into my back heel. So I'm picking it up here. And the key now is that I'm throwing from down and back to up and out. I do not want to throw the ball far, because that's the other thing that we're still getting a whole lot of times wrong. A serve has nothing to do with a pitch. What this exercise also works on is to get into the hip over hip, shoulder over shoulder, and then get into this position. Because ideally, as you're making contact, you're still going to be side on as much as possible. And when you're throwing, both hip and shoulder are completely open. Down and back, up and out, and I'm trying to keep my chest pointing to the side fence as long as possible, to then when I make contact, have basically the reverse tilt. Now my hitting shoulder is over my tossing arm shoulder, and my right hip as a right-hander is over my left. And that is exactly what this exercise works on. So again, loading. I'm loading down and back into my back heel, hip over hip, shoulder over shoulder. And now as I'm releasing, right hip over left hip, right shoulder over left shoulder. One more drill to develop the feel of the back leg load is use a rubber tube here, one of the pull ropes. What you're going to do is you're going to step on it or just fix it onto your front foot and get into your loading position. So it goes across your body here. And again, I'm dropping down here. I got my shoulder over shoulder, hip over hip, and I'm turning down and back. And now I'm going up and out. So that when I'm making contact, I'm going forward. So I want to lean slightly forward. I'm not just going to do this. I'm going from down and back, again, up and out. And you don't have to feel a whole lot of resistance. You just have to feel what you're doing here from down and back to up and out, because this here is where you're going to make contact. This is where you want to have a very, very stable shoulder. And once you got that motion, bam, see if you can accelerate a little bit more. And all the time while I'm doing that, I try to keep my chest facing towards you as long as possible, so that I'm not rotating out, because I'm leaving a lot of pop on the table if I do that. Okay, now it's time to go and hit some serves. And what I would suggest that you do is use these exercises in the progression that I showed you. And after each set of those exercises, go hit 5, 10 serves. Everybody responds a little differently to whatever is being cued in those exercises. And if you manage then to use the load of your back leg, of your back hip effectively, you're going to get a lot more power on the serve without then having to use and strain the parts that come later in the kinetic chain and in the stages of the serve. The first 3 stages of the serve, the stance, the grip, the toss, and the loading, are the most important stages of the serve. So that is where you should put your main focus when you're struggling with getting power on the serve. Follow me here on YouTube. Make sure that you know when I'm putting new content out. You can also follow me on Instagram at Meike Babel, and I'll be sure to see you on either one of these 2 channels very soon.